Election Night 2022.
We're now going to hear from a panel of experts. Faculty members from the Department of Political Science and Communication will weigh in on this election season and the significance of what will happen tonight. Let's go over to Gabriella Chu. She's standing by with the panel. Gabriella?
Thank you, Ellie and Avik. And that's right, I'm joined this evening by three professors here at Purdue University. Professor of Political Science, Dr. Eric Waltenberg, Professor of History, Dr. Catherine Brownell, and Professor of Political Science, Dr. Jay McCann. And I want to thank you all so much for being here this evening. And let's get right to it. I first want to ask you all about the significance of this midterm. In your expertise, what will history remember about tonight?
Should we just jump in?
Yep, go ahead. Whenever you guys are ready, you just go.
Okay, well, I'll jump in. And this is going to set the trajectory of the next 2 years under the Biden administration.
Mm-hmm.
The implications are just enormous, hard to overstate. Control of Congress. If it flips to the Republican Party, then Biden is going to have to completely change his strategy for governance, and we are likely to see all manner of policies being articulated that aren't heretofore been articulated out of Congress.
Yeah, I would second all that. I would also point out that, along with obviously the national elections that most people are paying most attention to, you've got a whole slew of state and local level races,
Mm-hmm.
which are massively important. You've got a number of Secretary of State candidates, gubernatorial candidates that have expressed doubt in the way elections are conducted, election machinery. And so this, in terms of the long-range impact on this election, it might really have serious repercussions for how future elections are viewed, and for that matter, how they're conducted.
As a historian, I can say that historically midterm elections, they matter. And they matter in terms of it allows voters to weigh in on legislative agendas, weigh in on a presidency, weigh in on programs that could be very unpopular. One thing that really comes to mind is that in 1998, Republicans were pursuing impeachment of Bill Clinton, and that was a very unpopular position. And the midterm elections that year showed it. Historically, the party in power that has the White House does lose seats during midterm elections. But that year, that was not the case. In the House, actually, Democrats picked up seats. So I think that there's considering the gravity of all the issues that are being presented and being debated during this election, I think we'll learn a lot about how the American people feel about them.
And now you talk about these midterm elections not usually being as popular, and they do typically have a lower turnout than presidential elections. And really, public interest does seem to usually be lower in these elections, even though in recent years it has been on an upward trend with early voting. How do you think tonight will play out in terms of voter turnout?
It remains to be seen, but I think that one of the things you saw in 2018 is that many people were unhappy with what happened during the 2016 election, and they mobilized to send a statement. And you did have voter turnout increase dramatically for a midterm election. And so there are many pressing issues with the Supreme Court and the Dobbs ruling, with conversations about January 6th and the insurrection, debates about the 2020 election that many people are having in their effort to try to deny some of these election results. And so I think that on both sides, people are very mobilized. And so that's why the stakes are so high.
Yeah, again, I would second that. There's a number of sort of catalyzing issues that are at work in this election. One was mentioned with the Dobbs decision. Certainly, some prior kind of special elections indicated just how much it might be mobilizing female voters, especially. And then you've got issues such as the January 6th insurrection in Washington. Let's not forget the consequences and the importance of economic conditions on the voting electorate as well. So the fact that inflation is at a very high level in terms of recent memory, that might be driving a lot of people to the polls too. The last midterm was right around 50%, and we might hit that and maybe even edge it out slightly in this time through.
And now this plays on my next question. As you've talked about some of these key issues being abortion and the economy, in your opinion, which will have the greatest impact on the results tonight?
Yeah, that remains to be seen. I'll jump in on that. The polling so far suggests that Americans were extremely engaged on the abortion issue a few months ago, but then the salience of that issue faded a bit, and more recent polls suggest that the crime issue has become a big concern, as well as general economic kinds of issues like inflation and unemployment and things like that. So the conventional wisdom would say the economy is really going to loom large. We'll know a bit more, through exit polls and what voters actually say. I suspect you're going to find pockets. Midterms are about really lots of local elections happening all at the same time. And I imagine there are going to be lots of communities out there where the abortion issue gives a great deal of traction, and others where there's much greater concern about crime or some other issue. Mm-hmm. So it may be difficult to generalize in the aggregate.
And now, what races are you guys watching, or which ones do you find most interesting?
As someone who studies celebrity in politics, I've been absolutely watching the Georgia race, of course, and the Pennsylvania race. And it's been really fascinating to see the ways in which different types of celebrity have been mobilized in both of those, and also the money, the money that is being spent in this midterm election in both of those races and others is reaching new levels for midterm elections as well.
Probably a bellwether race that's been identified by the national media is actually an Indiana race, House District 1. It's currently held by Mervyn, a Democrat, and there's a pretty strong Republican candidate. I forget. I'm sorry, I can't remember her first name. Her last name is Green, but she's like I said, she's a pretty strong Republican candidate. So there may be a chance to flip that House district. Going sort of one step lower, I'm really kind of interested in what redistricting might have done to some of the House races in the Indiana General Assembly. So I'm watching the Sheila Clinker contest to see what might be going on there, because they districted her out of what had been a pretty safe seat. So
let me just say, for my part, I'd agree with all of them. These are all very noteworthy races. I'm going to be watching what happens a few days after the results are called. Okay, and there are a couple of the Arizona Senate race, for instance. Will there be a clean concession if the Republican nominee loses, or will there be a kind of call to arms? What happens if Herschel Walker in Georgia, if he ends up losing? And I suspect that'll go to a runoff, so we may not know the results for a while on that. But how gracefully will the concessions be, if at all graceful?
And given on what happened in the 2020 presidential election, and talking about those recounts and runoffs, what are your thoughts on that, and studying this and kind of looking at U.S. politics over the years? What are your thoughts?
I would say that concession is a really important part of the political process. It's an opportunity for the loser, whoever loses a particular race, to remind people that this is the democratic process at work, and to instill faith in the democratic process and trust in it. And so if there is a trend to have more people who refuse to concede, that is not good for the democratic process. Mm-hmm.
And now, before I wrap this up, I want to just ask your opinion on the results tonight, and who you think is going to take control of the House and who you think is going to take control of the Senate.
I can just give you a very quick response on that. As near as we can forecast outcomes, it looks like the Republicans will take control of the House, given various considerations, even just drawing new district lines and so on, and the way gerrymandering happened in some places. So So that looks pretty likely. The Senate, I would say, is a toss-up. We'll see. There are going to be a lot of, I think, short-term forces tilting, states like Pennsylvania or Georgia one way or the other.
And I would agree with Jay. I would also point out that historically, as was mentioned, midterms tend to be damaging, so let's say, to say the least, to the incumbent party, the party holding the White House. They typically lose, I think, on average 4 seats in midterms. The fact that the fact that Biden's popularity numbers are as low as they are, the fact that inflation is as high as it is, and the fact that the Senate remains, for all intents and purposes, a toss-up, I think is indicative of just how important candidacies can be. And I don't think we should ever forget about sort of the relevance of who is actually running for these seats.
That's such a great point. And I will say that I'm a history professor, so I do not predict the future. Clearly, there's differences in our disciplines, but whatever happens will be very historic, indeed.
I want to thank you all for a great discussion. And we'll see if your predictions do come true. Now we're going to send it back over to Avik and Ellie and see if they have any updates.
Thank you, Gabriella. We've been receiving some information in our newsroom as the polls begin to close. As far as Indiana, there's only 1% reporting, but so far, Senator Todd Young, current incumbent, has 70% of the vote.
We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back in a moment.
Being involved in the 3-year program at Purdue made it easier to say to myself I could get done in 3 years. The 3-year program helped save me a ton of money. In not completing my 4th year, I would save around $30,000. It will give you an advantage, if anything. Doing the 3-year program at Purdue has shown me that I have motivation to do whatever it takes to get my degree.
Hi there, my name is Vikram Jaithlak, and I'm the founder and president of the Purdue chapter of the University Blood Initiative. Over the past 2 years, we've been able to collect over 300 pints of blood to be donated to local hospitals, and you can be the next one to help out.
I donate my blood at the University Blood Initiative.
Hi, I just donated blood through the University Blood Initiative.
Hi, I just donated blood through the University Blood Initiative at Purdue.
Right, I donated my blood through the University Blood Initiative at Purdue.
And I donated my blood at University Blood Initiative at Purdue.
Are you looking for a new hobby?
Or you want to have a fun evening with your friends?
Then come climb to new heights at the Co-Rec Climbing Wall.
Football. It's the best time of the year. You know what else is great? The world's largest and fastest mascot. You can't have Purdue football without the trains. Look for the Reamer Club outside Stewart Center, 12 to 5 p.m. on Fridays before home football games, for your chance to ride the Boilermaker Special for free. See you then!
You're watching Fast Track News.
I work for student life because I'm able to develop leadership skills that will carry over after college.
I I work in student life because I'm developing time management skills and friendships that will last a lifetime.
The Center for...
What does it take to be a Purdue tour guide? You've got to know your history. You have to know your facts. You gotta have that Purdue spirit. And you have to walk backwards.
Imagine a world where Olympics and Paralympics are unified as one, and where all athletes at all levels have equal opportunities to play and perform at their full potential.
Athletics has been such an influential and transformative aspect of my life. So to me, RISE is about ensuring that every person that has the desire to participate in sport has the opportunity to do so.
This organization is about recognition. We believe in recognizing excellence where it is found, especially in Paralympic sports.
RISE is about driving change in our community and beyond. We hope that through our events and initiatives, we can galvanize people for our cause and inspire them to create an ever-growing network to help achieve our mission.
It's about connecting people of various backgrounds and who truly care about creating meaningful change together.
We develop projects and hold events to bring people together at the interface of inclusivity, sports, and engineering.
Our goal is to promote the equality of all sports and to improve sports performance and accessibility.
Join us so that you can have a major contribution in creating meaningful change.
I mean, every year's different. That much. Our league is just ominous, and you better lace them up tight and be ready to play every night. If not, you're going to get beat.
Hi there, my name is Vikram Jaithlak, and I'm the founder and president of the Purdue chapter of the University Blood Initiative. Over the past 2 years, we've been able to collect over 300 pints of blood to be donated to local hospitals, and you can be the next one to help out.
I donate my blood at the University Blood Initiative.
Hi, I just donated blood through the University Blood Initiative.
Hi, I just donated blood through the University Blood Initiative at Purdue.
Right, I donated my blood through the University Blood Initiative at Purdue.
And I donated my blood at University Blood Initiative at Purdue.
Are you looking for a new hobby?
Or you want to have a fun evening with your friends?
Then come climb to new heights at the co-rec climbing wall.
Hello, thanks for sticking with Purdue University's coverage of the 2022 midterm elections. I'm Ellie Akra.
And I'm Avik Patel. It's now been 30 minutes since polls closed in the East, including here in Indiana.
And 30 minutes before more polls close. But voting continues in those key states where the control of Congress may lie. In Georgia and Florida, all polls close at 7 o'clock. In Ohio, polls remain open until 7:30 Eastern Time. We are keeping an eye on election results as they come in. It's still early, but here's what we know at this hour. In Indiana and Kentucky, votes have been starting to be counted. Right now, we have 2% of the vote in Indiana. One of the races we've been watching here in Indiana is Todd Young versus Tom McDermott. Todd Young now has 58.1% of the vote. to McDermott's 40%. This race was one that started out pretty divided, but as we've neared the end, it's gotten a little closer. Still pretty confident Senator Young will come out in the lead in that one. But what are some of the other races that you've been watching, Avik?
Well, one of my favorite races to watch has been Oz versus Fetterman up in Pennsylvania. Dr. Oz, obviously everyone knows him for his show, the Dr. Oz Show, but not as many people know about John Fetterman. John Fetterman has served as Lieutenant Governor of Pennsylvania and has a very unique approach. People might have seen his campaign videos of him in a sweatshirt, not as formal as the traditional senator looks like. So he's definitely created an interesting image for himself, which has helped him a lot in this race.
Yeah, and I think that unique image is key as you're going against a celebrity such as Dr. Oz. We've touched a little bit throughout this semester on the impact of celebrities in elections, and that's certainly playing out in the Pennsylvania U.S. Senate race. This one is going to be very close, one of those races that we might not know this evening. Currently, from 538, the latest poll had Oz 47.4% over Fetterman at 46.9%. But again, these races are really too close to call, and the polls, can change every day.
Yeah, and what's so interesting about this race in particular is that Dr. Oz and John Fetterman each have things that they've been campaigning against each other for. An issue for John Fetterman has been his health. Dr. Oz has continuously pointed out that John Fetterman might not be physically fit to be a senator in Pennsylvania. And John Fetterman has attacked Dr. Oz for his residency issues. He recently moved to Pennsylvania from New Jersey in 2020, just a year before he announced his election for the Senate seat in Pennsylvania. So both kind of negative talking points that Fetterman and Oz have used against each other. So we're going to have to see how that impacts the race in Pennsylvania.
Another race full of controversies is definitely the one between Raphael Warnock and Republican Herschel Walker. Warnock is the sitting Democrat incumbent in Georgia. An extremely tight race again that's been fluctuating every day, but the latest 538 poll there had Walker ahead 47.8% over Warnock 46.8%. And this one, there's definitely been focus on the issues of abortion here with some controversies with Republican Herschel Walker. He is a Heisman Trophy winner, a very well-known name in Georgia for football, but Warnock is the incumbent, and he's been serving since 2021 in a runoff election that he had against another Trump-backed candidate. Speaking of runoffs, if neither of these candidates gets over 50% of the vote tonight, Georgia will go into a runoff election that will take place on December 6th, and that is seeming like it could be likely.
Yeah, and the impact of celebrities running for office. We've seen Herschel Walker announce his Senate bid. We've seen Dr. Oz announce his Senate bid. But a lot of other widely known celebrities have publicly pondered public office. For example, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson has publicly considered running for president at some point, as has actor Matthew McConaughey. He's also considered running for president. So, Ellie, I got to ask you, what do you think the impact of celebrities is going to be, not just tonight in these midterms, but going forward into 24 and years beyond?
I think over the past few years, it's certainly shown that if you have the name recognition as a celebrity going into the election, that can definitely help you. But it's also shown that politicians are developing a celebrity-like stature that a lot of Americans have seen. And I think that's something that will continue, is not just viewing politicians as our legislators anymore, but a lot of them have taken on that star factor, and I see that continuing to grow.
Yeah, Dr. Catherine Brownell, who we had on a faculty panel a couple minutes ago, if you might have missed it, along with Dr. Jay McCann and Dr. Eric Waltenberg. We want to thank them once again, for taking the time to join us on the faculty panel. We've got a lot more interesting panels tonight, but let's move to some of the issues that might impact the midterms tonight. You mentioned abortion. With the Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade in June of 2022, it effectively shifted the decision on whether or not to ban abortion back to the states. And that has been one of the, if not the most contentious issue that has driven voters out to the polls. So what do you think the impact of abortion will be on the election tonight? Elections,
Well, I think looking at these elections, to me, there are two major factors that are motivating both sides and that Republicans and Democrats have focused on. For Republicans, it's been the economy, and for Democrats, it's been abortion and women's rights in that area. So through campaign ads, through all of these campaigns we've been seeing in all these close races, again, it's not just the candidates, but they've been focusing on these issues. Democrats leaning on that abortion stance and Republicans focusing on the economy. I focused a lot on the economy in my prep for tonight, and it's often said that people will vote with their pocketbooks, and so we'll see if that holds true tonight or not, because there are also a lot of other controversial things like abortion, as you mentioned, on the ballot.
Yeah, and Democrats and Republicans alike have been pitching those issues very, very heavily to their voter bases. Their campaigns are basically sending a message to voters as if to vote as if those issues that they care about are on the line. So what do you think about the campaign strategies of Democrats and Republicans, and how do you think that dire style of campaigning is going to drive voter turnout?
Whether I agree or disagree, I think that is just the way that politics works sometimes, and the way to motivate voters. You want to motivate them with what's right in front of their face, and those two things, through social media, I think abortion issue has been right in front of a lot of people's faces, but also every day going to the gas pump in the grocery store, the economy affects voters every single day. And so those things that are most prominent in the minds of voters are going to be what politicians focus on, whether that's right or wrong. And it'll be interesting too, no matter the results of the election, to see the follow through on these issues, whether Democrats follow through if they win control, if they follow through on abortion rights and protecting those, or if Republicans win control, how they're going to follow through on making the economy better and lowering inflation and the cost of living right now.
All of these different issues and the impact on voters driving them to the polls is a perfect segue into our next segment. A lot of factors that can impact the final results of so many key races.
And again, as we said, it all comes down to turnout. One demographic that both Republicans and Democrats are trying to appeal to is the youth vote.
What are young, in some cases, first-time voters thinking about with these midterms? What issues are important to them? Which candidates appeal to them? And are they voting?
Juntong Liu is moderating our second panel of the night, Purdue University students. We'll find out what this panel thinks of the impact of the youth vote. Juntong?
Thank you, Ellie and Alec. Young voters can play a significant role in these elections, but will they come to vote or will they not? Do they feel connected to a party or to a candidate? Let's find out. And hello, my name is Juntong Liu, and my first question is very easy. Is what's your name, what your major is, and what year are you in Purdue University?
Hi, my name is Michaela Klemp, and I'm currently a junior here at Purdue. I'm a history major.
I'm Caitlin Price. I'm also a junior studying accounting and history.
I'm Owen Petoskey. I'm a senior studying political science and history.
Thank you. So for this midterm elections, do you think they're important to you as a young voter?
I think the importance to youth vote has kind of a disconnect in who is voting and who is representing, because we see with this youth vote, people can start voting at the age of 18, but if you look at the ages of the people who are representing us in Congress and who are representing us in the state legislature, a lot of that voting body is much older individuals. So I think that people wanting to come out and vote, it's hard for them to find candidates that they connect with such an older participation body.
I agree. There is a bit of a disconnect in that I feel like the issues that young voters emphasize more, such as those social issues like abortion or marijuana legislation, they're going to be very different issues that the older generations are focused on. And I also feel like young voters don't really feel like they have that much of an impact, just because we don't have that complete understanding yet. So I think just as young voters develop, we'll see more of our generation begin to vote in later years.
Yeah, I think there's definitely been a disconnect. I think a lot of people assume that politics are for older or maybe wiser people, but things matter, and the decisions these legislators are making, they matter. And once you turn 18, taking your energy and taking what you believe into the polls is important. And the disconnect does exist, I think, but it's important. I think in 2020, the youth vote did come out more so in history, and I think tonight it will as well.
Yeah, they are very important. And what do you think are the issues that are important to you or other young voters?
I mean, I would say I'm primarily an interest that I have is the economy. As a senior here at Purdue, I'll be entering the workforce here in a few short months. And the economy is something you've heard your parents complain about, or say it's strong or it's weak. But going into the workforce and then realizing a lot of these issues are coming to me, that's really what I'm concerned about this cycle.
Yeah, I agree. Just knowing that there's going to be a job out there for me once I leave college, definitely something very important. I also tend to focus on social issues a lot more, specifically like marijuana legislation, just because in Indiana especially, like Delta 8 is legal, but marijuana is still illegal. So you have a lot of people in prison that at the same time people out in public are using a substance that's like so similar. So I also think that's just very interesting, just in the technicality of the entire thing. Abortion is also a big issue that I focus on a lot, but yeah.
As a student with another year to be here at Purdue, I would say economy is probably my biggest one as well, because not only does it affect students that are going out into the workforce, but it affects things like cost of living in terms of the rent that we are paying and in terms of the gas that we are using to get to and from campus, to and from homes when we are traveling. So that would probably be my number one issue on the table for tonight.
Okay, thank you. And my next question is, did you vote? Why or why not?
I can start. I did not vote. And that was mostly because I honestly didn't know the registration deadline. So that went into play. And I also didn't have time to drive home to vote either. So it's just like an unfortunate sequence of events for me.
Yeah, I was able to vote. I have changed my address down here to where I live at Purdue, and I was able to go into the polls. And I think it's a good thing that with the use of mail-in ballots and absentee ballots, I think it has made it easier for a lot of students to vote. And I think the polls will reflect that.
I personally also did not vote. Regrettably, it's the same thing where I'm registered in my own county. I was not able to travel home at this time to go and vote, and I guess there was a bit of a disconnect in the education surrounding voter, where things like absentee or like early voting are available now. That's not really something I guess they covered in high school government classes. So definitely something to keep in mind for the next election.
Thank you. And what races do you think you guys are closely watching?
I would say I would start up in terms of the Senate up in New Hampshire. The polls in New Hampshire close, I believe, around 7, so in another 14-ish minutes. And there you have an interesting race between Maggie Hassan and General Bolduc. And that race, within the last 2 weeks, the Republicans have poured millions of dollars into that race. And I think if you look at the strongholds, the Democratic strongholds, Republican strongholds in that state in the early return, I think you will see in large part a picture of how the night's going for Republicans or for Democrats. And I think if the vote is in favor of Bolduc early in New Hampshire, then I think you're really going to see a successful Republican night. And I think it works vice versa with Maggie Hassan. A few House races I would watch. I'd really watch Washington 8 and a couple of elections in Virginia that will really impact how the night goes.
One race that I kind of found interesting was that in Northwest Indiana. I think it's the 1st district, if I remember correctly. Up there by Chicago, it's historically a lot more left-leaning, but from what I read, it's starting to shift more Republican, which I found kind of interesting. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for participating in this panel discussion. We appreciate your time and your honest answers. I'm Juntong Liu, and let's send it back over to Avik and Ali.
Thank you, Juntong. The time is now 6:47 while we are waiting on more results to come in.
We've got 3% of the vote in the state of Kentucky, where Democrat Charles Booker has a lead over Republican Rand Paul, the longtime Kentucky senator, by 56.2% to 43.8% of the vote. Again, that's only 3% of the vote, We've got a lot more vote to count, but this will be something to keep an eye on as we eye a potential upset in Kentucky.
Certainly, and as we wait on more results, let's check in with the election night watch party in Stewart Center.
We've got reporter Jaden Rousey standing by with a special guest. Jaden?
Thank you, Ellie and Avik. I'm here with Andrea Langers, who is the Managing Director of the Center for C-SPAN Scholarship and Engagement, also commonly known as CCSE. And they're actually one of the sponsors for tonight's watch party. So tonight I'm just be asking her just a couple of questions of how she feels tonight's been going so far. So Andrea, what are your thoughts on the event so far?
So far, the event's going great. If you look behind me, there are lots of students out here. If you're not out here yet, please join us downstairs at the student organization space on the ground floor of Stewart Center. We've got lots of food, lots of great things going on. Pi Sigma Alpha's out here, so absolutely come out and see us.
And then can you tell me a little more about what CCSE is and how students can get involved in a program like that?
Okay. So CCSE is the Center for C-SPAN Scholarship and Engagement. We're part of the Brian Lamb School of Communication, and we have a lot of things that go on throughout the year. So first place I would tell you to check into is the CCSE student community. If you're looking for a great student organization that doesn't require a specific major and is open to anybody who is curious about history, government, politics, news media, absolutely check this group out. We're the ones that do the pizza and politics events. So if you're interested in free food, but then also talking about current events in a nonpartisan way, absolutely come check us out with the pizza and politics. And then also we do the civics literacy podcasts. So if you're doing the civics literacy requirement, which everybody has to, you can do our podcasts. Fantastic way to do it. And we also do our undergraduate research competition, which we call the URC. So check that out tomorrow night, by the way. We have 15 great competitors. We have a lot of stuff really going on throughout the year. We do our conference. We also just did the conversation with Mitch Daniels and Brian Lamb. We'll be doing another one in April. And we really have a great program for students for internships. So if you're interested in doing an internship, absolutely check out our internship program.
Well, thank you very much, Andrea, for your time and for sponsoring this event like this. And now I'm going to pass it back to you guys, Ellie and Avik, in the studio, and see if we got any more results coming in.
Thank you, Jaden. Right now, we want to take a minute and tell you a little bit about us and how this evening came to be. Several of the people you see on camera tonight are involved in on-camera courses within the Lamb School of Communication. Avik and I are part of COM 497.
In addition to tonight's live broadcast, us COM 497 students produce a weekly public affairs show on the Purdue channel and YouTube. It's called Watching Washington, and we utilize the C-SPAN archives for a weekly recap of the top political news stories. We also have a weekly guest who we interview as part of a long-form interview segment.
Here's a look at some of those past interviews.
A lot of our politicians are, in their 70s, 80s. Their values may and are a lot different than, people who are just turning 18, who are just going to college for the first time. The problems that they are focusing on and their kind of values, very different. So, people and students who are just now, learning to vote and getting involved in the civic, process, their votes is going to look a lot different. And that's really important because they are going to be impacted the most by a lot of the policies that are brought in by the current politicians. So a lot of students don't really understand their importance in voting or the one vote doesn't matter kind of mentality, but it really does. We see elections all the time that are incredibly close.
In the 50s, people worried that the parties didn't stand for anything. They were Tweedledee and Tweedledum. But today, parties are very different. And if you elect a Democrat, you're going to get very different policies than if you elect a Republican. So if you care about the issues, if you care about issues like abortion or inflation or taxes or student loans, it makes a difference whether you elect a Democrat or Republican. The same way with the Senate, it's very narrow, it's 50-50, and it takes more votes than 50 to get things done in the Senate. And so voting in those elections can really make a difference.
What's wrong with the government?
it's kind of a forward question, but
I think as a voter, I'd like to see maybe some congressional reform in the future. Maybe, implementing age restrictions or term limits, just those kinds of things. And also maybe, an increase in integrity over time, just personally.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think reform in the courts and everything else, and not being so party based and biased might be good. I think that has a lot to do with how people feel. I think a lot of people feel like we're going backwards, and I don't think it's impossible to revert that and go forward and see growth. But I think that has a lot to do with how people feel about the current state of the government and being pessimistic.
What role do you see unbiased, unpartisan news playing in the midterm elections this year?
Well, that's a great question. I think in general, I talk about news as a service because it should be. And it's one of those few industries that I think really thinks about itself as a service industry. If you were running a restaurant or you have a clothing store or you have a plumbing business, you think about customer service because that's how you're going to survive. But for some reason, the news industry doesn't feel like, and I can certainly speak to that, it doesn't feel like, nor did I feel like it believed that service was the priority. It was that entertainment and emotion was becoming more of the priority for its viewers. But what I was hearing from viewers and what I continue to hear is people just want the news. They just want to understand what's going on. So where I think news can really play a great role in the public's life is by being a destination where you can get really solid, reliable information.
What type of conflicts are you thinking? Well, we can already see conflict between Biden and conservatives in the House and Senate. There's been a lot of media backlash calling Biden's presidency illegitimate these past 2 years, and a lot of social issues from the January 6th storming of the Capitol. And moving forward, there will be continual social media and political rivalries and backlash continued.
As we wait for more results to come in, let's go back out live to our election night watch party in Stewart Center.
Andrea Yu is in the new Student Organization Center space, which is on the ground and basement levels of Stewart. Andrea?
That's right, there's a lot going on here tonight. Besides from looking at live election results coming in, we also have some stations set up behind us here where students can weigh in on personal opinions on important political issues to them. This was set up by the Honor Society for Poli-Sci here at Purdue called Pi Sigma Alpha, and I'm joined here today by a few of their members. Could you guys please give yourself some introduction about yourselves and also what the society does?
Yeah, of course. Hi, I'm Ashton Katie. I'm the president of Pi Sigma Alpha. So we are a political science honor society, as you said, and we kind of work with students and create a community of students who are in political science classes for friendships and also for professional building techniques.
Hi everyone, I'm Christina Galiatatos and I'm the treasurer of Pi Sigma Alpha.
Hi, I'm Abigail Mullins and I'm the alumni relations coordinator of Pi Sigma Alpha.
Can you guys please tell me why you thought it was important to get involved as an organization tonight?
I mean, as a political science honor society, politics and government is super important to us. So an election night watch party is a perfect place for us to be, hang out with a bunch of like-minded people who are interested in politics and government and the election tonight.
All right, could you guys give a little explanation about the stations that you guys have set up here tonight?
Yeah, of course. So the first station we have set up is right behind us. You can see a wheel of prizes.
And we also have a whiteboard with issues regarding social issues that are important to us for the election.
All right, thank you guys so much for your time tonight. I'm going to send it back to the studio.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea.
It is now 6:57 and more polls are getting ready to close, which means more results should be coming in. We're going to take a quick break and change seats with our classmates.
Sean English and Gabriella Chu have got you covered for the next hour. Ellie moves behind the scenes as our producer, and I'll be back with Juntong Liu to moderate more panel discussions.
Don't go away. We'll be right back.
You're watching the Purdue Channel.
The Center for C-SPAN, which is this organization, the CCSC, what we do is we facilitate like a bunch of organizations, different programs for Brian Lamb, which is the founder of C-SPAN. Anyone can be part of CCSC, whether it be through our various internships, our competitions, just to be involved, even like our student community meetings that we have every week. Anyone can go. You don't have to be communications or poli-sci. You just meet so many people. The connections you make is kind of crazy, the range that CCSC has. So yeah, it's just provided me so many opportunities to like kind of achieve the goals I have personally and forward to like whatever career paths I choose.
I wake up, flex, thumb down now, check, no drip this, wet, tell 'em run it up, no sleep, no rest, might crash, might wreck, but first I stretch, tell 'em run it up, I wake up, flex, thumb down now, check, no drip this, wet, tell 'em run it up.
I work for student life because I'm able to develop leadership skills that will carry over after college.
I work in student life because I'm developing time management skills and friendships that will last a lifetime.
What does it take to be a Purdue tour guide? You've got to know your history. You have to know your facts. You've got to have that Purdue spirit. And you have to walk backwards.
Being involved in the 3-year program at Purdue made it easier to say to myself I could get done in 3 years. The 3-year program helped save me a ton of money. In not completing my 4th year, I would save around $30,000. It will give you an advantage, if anything. Doing the 3-year program at Purdue has shown me that I have motivation to do whatever it takes to get my degree.
Close and results begin to pour in on what could be a historic night.
Whether it was the issues or the candidates, tonight's midterm election is all about control of Congress.
Hello everyone, I'm Sean English.
And I'm Gabriella Chu. This is Election Night 2022. Thank you for sticking with our live coverage tonight from the Digital Media Production Center here at Purdue University.
And a special shout out to everyone watching us from our brand new student organization space here in Stewart Center.
That's where our Election Night watch party is happening tonight. This is a live picture of the watch party right down the hall. A big thanks to Pi Sigma Alpha, the Political Science Honor Society, and to the Center for C-SPAN Scholarship and Engagement, as well as the Departments of Political Science and History. Tonight has been a collaboration in the making for several months now.
And this broadcast is something Gabrielle and I, as well as the rest of our Com 497 course, have been a part of. Tonight's broadcast is actually a part of our grade. We've been researching candidates and races and interviewing students and experts.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, Sean, we did have the opportunity to hear from faculty and students researching U.S. politics, which I believe has helped to prepare us for tonight. And I know that we all have enjoyed being able to do this. It's a little shameless plug for our show. It's called Watching Washington, and you can find all of our episodes on YouTube. And you can also watch the show every Friday at 12:30 here on the Purdue channel.
Well, it is now past 7 o'clock, and that means more polls have closed and more results will continue to come in.
Right now, an update on the races we're following. So we're actually following a few races, and the first one I would like to talk about is Georgia. I think that's a big one that a lot of people are following. And it's a really big race with Walker and Warnock, and the incumbent Democrat that is also the pastor. He's also pro-life, which is rare to see in the religious area, against someone who's Walker, who is a Heisman candidate or Heisman Trophy winner in 1982, and a football player that went on to the NFL and is now a Hall of Famer. And he's pro-life as a stance, but he also has some controversies in the past. And are you familiar with some of those controversies that he's had?
I mean, given like what we've learned on the allegations that Walker has had, that's kind of came to light in recent weeks. That's all I really, and what you've been saying, that's all I've really known so far. But taking it to the race in Arizona, where we have Democrat Mark Kelly up against the Republican Blake Masters. Kelly is a former NASA astronaut and Navy veteran. Blake Masters is a venture capitalist and author. And I will say, I think that that's been an interesting race to watch because Mark Kelly, as I've been paying attention, he's been in the lead for the polls. And I just think that this also is really interesting because Kelly also is the husband of former U.S. Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, who who retired due to a traumatic brain injury following an attempted assassination. This has been a really interesting race as Arizona is one of 17 states to enact restrictive voting laws in 2021. That includes proof of requiring citizenship to vote by mail or in presidential elections. And so I really think that seeing that Mark has been in the lead in the polls so far, it's just really going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, we actually had a recent dropout of that race too. Could you talk to me a little bit about that?
Oh yes. So the Libertarian, Mark Victor, he recently dropped out of the race and he has backed the Republican, Blake Masters. And so I think that'll be interesting to see if that has an effect on what happens in the polls.
Yeah, I'm really interested into looking at those races as well as others.
A big focus of this election season has been the issues, two in particular, abortion rights and the economy, which we also heard from our faculty and our panel earlier today. What else?
Gun violence, healthcare, immigration, new voting laws. Many not have made as many headlines leading up to tonight, but they're top of mind for many voters. And the main issue that I want to look at among so many other issues leading up to this election is I'm going to talk about the minority vote and how that has an impact on the Roe v. Wade and Dobbs and everything that we've talked about. Since 2000, 1/3 of all abortions have come from African-American women. So the minority vote is going to come down to a lot of policies that are going to be on the ballot this year with Democrat and Republican. And it's not just red versus blue. It's more about how their lives are going to be set up. And the minority vote is one of many things that we've been talking about as issues to watch. What issue have you been watching closely?
I've been paying close attention to gun violence and gun rights as the midterms have approached. I do think this is interesting because according to a Rutgers article, gun safety did used to be a bipartisan issue, but over the past 40 years, it does seem that Republican lawmakers have opposed almost all new gun legislation. And I say this is interesting because in 2022 alone, there have been over 300 mass shootings, from Uvalde to the Highland Park shooting to the shooting at the supermarket in Buffalo, New York. And this did result in President Joe Biden releasing new gun legislation, which is the first that we've really seen in decades. And this legislation, although it is a step forward, this doesn't completely ban all assault weapons. But it does include incentives for states to pass so-called red flags, And what these do is they allow groups to petition courts to remove weapons that are deemed a threat to themselves or others. And I also do think that this is a key issue because large majorities view gun violence as a problem in the country on both sides of the spectrum. We see, Democrats and Republicans both saying that gun violence is a problem in the country and important to their vote. This is especially true among young voters like those, like Generation Z. And so those are some of the key issues that we've been keeping an eye on.
And turnout election day, before election day, has been pretty incredible. Early voting numbers in total have surpassed that of 2018. U.S. News and World Report says that the 2018 midterms reached a 40-year high in terms of turnout. That number was 49.5%. So nearly 50% of eligible voters participated then. Experts have been predicting this year midterms to top that number.
Now, if early voting numbers are any indication, that could be the case. And then will the polls turn out to be more or less accurate? The tide in terms of overall polls had been trending better for Republicans this fall, with the economy and inflation being a major factor. But also, the Dobbs decision, the Supreme Court overturning of Roe versus Wade led to a surge of women registering to vote.
And just this past weekend, NBC News released a poll that showed Democrats surpassing Republicans in terms of enthusiasm for the midterm elections. It was still very close, but something Democrats, I'm sure, were happy to see. Early voting was held on October 26 in Mackey Arena. I was there, and I actually observed so many people, including someone that was actually on the ballot, a Democratic nominee who's a professor here. And I saw so many people. I saw some poll watchers. I saw a lot of volunteers. And it was cool to see people who normally go to a basketball game at Mackey Arena were actually going to vote. Defense and dunks turned into democracy overnight. And it's really cool, especially with basketball season getting underway here at Purdue. It was home for something greater, I would say, with early voting. So it was really cool. There was a lot of people out there passing out flyers and pamphlets. And it was just a really cool thing to see.
The Purdue community also had another option today. Kroc Leadership Center on 3rd Street gave the west side of campus a convenient location to cast their vote. We sent Kevin Sarge over there to see how things were going.
I am here outside of the Kroc Leadership Center, where polling stations are available from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. for Purdue students to vote on the midterm election. We're going to ask a few questions today to see how voting went. How did voting go for you today?
Super easy. The line was like 2 minutes and everyone was super nice. I think it's important to exercise your civic duty of voting. Every vote matters, and I think that it's just important to be informed and vote.
Do you have anything to say to anybody who is considering not voting today?
Every vote matters, even if you think that the state has a history of going one way or another. I think you should just come out and vote and at least figure out who is even running and learn about what's going on.
Voting went pretty well for me today. There was no lines, so that was great. I think it was important because even though we are just small individuals, our vote does matter over time, and the amount of people that vote can make a difference. I used to think that voting wasn't important, but as I've paid attention more to what's going on in the world, I realized that it is important for us to vote, so I would support it.
I'm Kevin Sarge with the Purdue News Channel. Stay tuned for more election coverage after this break.
I'm part of the Purdue Peace Project as an undergrad research assistant. So the Purdue Peace Project really likes to engage Engaging locals is kind of their entire vision, whether it's in the communities and projects they're working in abroad or here at Purdue. So we're doing a bunch of research about political unrest, specifically in communities in West Africa and Central America. We don't just want that to be scholarly work, like we would like to contribute literature to this domain, but at the same time, like, what does this look like practically? These are people's lives, so how do you help them and how do you facilitate sustainable growth and change? The Purdue Peace Project coming in as a peace-building organization and implementing some program or initiative in a community where we've never been and where we don't live and don't fully understand. So it's more operating as a think tank and kind of like a diplomatic consultant in a way. I really love just how it's combining like academia and what we're interested in scholarly with like actually helping people, like we're actually making a difference.
Being involved in the 3-year program at Purdue made it easier to say to myself, I could get done in 3 years. The 3-year program helped save me a ton of money. And not completing my 4th year, I would save around $30,000. It will give you an advantage if anything. Doing the 3-year program at Purdue has shown me that I have motivation to do whatever it takes to get my degree.
Hi there, my name is Vikram Jaithak and I'm the founder and president of the Purdue chapter of the University Blood Initiative. Over the past 2 years, we've been able to collect over 300 pints of blood to be donated to local hospitals, and you can be the next one to help out.
I donate my blood at the University Blood Initiative.
Hi, I just donated blood through the University Blood Initiative.
Hi, I just donated blood through the University Blood Initiative at Purdue.
Right, I donated my blood through the University Blood Initiative at Purdue.
And I donated my blood at University Blood Initiative at Purdue.
You're watching the Purdue Channel.
It's election night, and it's now time to take a look at the live shot that we have over there down the hall. What's at stake tonight? 35 Senate seats and all 435 seats in the House, plus races for governor and statewide races, county races, and school board races in some states. Inflation in the economy, abortion rights, gun violence, immigration, the future of democracy, all issues that are impacting voter turnout and the vote tonight. We're coming to you live from Purdue University right now, and we want to hear from the student body. Are young voters voting, and what issues are important to them? Before we go, we do have a quick update. AP has called South Carolina for Republican Tim Scott, and Vermont was also just called for Democrat Peter Welsh.
And now we're going to hand it over to Juntong Liu, who is back with another group of students to find out what they think. Juntong.
Thanks, Sean and Gabriella. That's right, we've got a fresh group of students with us in the studio. Thank you all for being here. First, can you tell us your names, what your major is, and what year are you in?
My name is Lauren Rodabush. This is my 2nd year at Purdue, and I'm a history major.
My name is Andrew Eckmeyer. I'm a junior here at Purdue, and my major is political science.
Thanks. On a scale of 1 to 10, how interested are you in the results tonight?
I would say probably a 7. Obviously, given my major being political science, I'm into politics and kind of really interested in that. I definitely haven't followed as much this year as I have in the past. Just been kind of busy with a few things, but still definitely very interested. Curious to see how it turns out. So.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm interested to see presidents typically do kind of bad in their first midterm, so I want to see how that would turn out, especially with how the Republican Party is changing to see if it goes either as a type of purging or if they get more members in the House and Congress.
Okay. My second question is, do you think the campaigns have paid enough attention or have done enough to go after the young voters?
I would say so. I think that one thing I noticed today, like when I opened Instagram, is one of the first stories they have is vote, and that's not really a particular campaign, but it is just kind of companies and kind of interjecting themselves into that, and just trying to really increase voter turnout. And I think with a social media platform like Instagram that is mostly geared towards younger people, or mostly made up of younger people using it, I think that was definitely a way it's kind of engaging with younger voters more.
I would agree. On Instagram, I'm definitely seeing a lot of ads, and also a lot of candidates are really working with infographics that people are sharing on their stories, and that's a really easy way to get their stances on issues out. I've seen a lot with Indiana's senator race about their stance on abortion rights. It's something that I've been seeing getting shared around a lot today. So I would agree that really taking advantage of social media, Instagram and Snapchat has been something.
Thank you. And for this year's midterm election, which race do you like to watch or are very interested in?
I would say, kind of like she mentioned previously with the House, historically, that first midterm election or that first election cycle after a new president is usually the opposite party. So in this case, Republicans usually take it back. So I guess I am curious to see if that trend kind of continues into the future. And then, with the Senate, how much of a, does the country, kind of go with Biden right now, or is it more so kind of looking for change already only 2 years in? Just kind of seeing how that's going to be reflected in the House and the Senate.
For me personally, one of the bigger issues is women's rights, abortion rights. And for that, I'm really honed in on our state Senate race personally. And in addition to that, some of the governor races, Georgia, Stacey Abrams versus Kemp, and then in Texas with Beto and Abbott. I think those are two big governor races, and governors have a lot of say when it comes to bills like heartbeat bills and that kind of thing. So I'm really interested to see how those turn out.
Do you think the polls are accurate or are they not in these races?
I would say, based on I hate to bring up the historical thing again, but based on, what a lot of them have, kind of a strong showing for Republicans, I guess historically that would probably seem to be the case, just given that it's the first election cycle after a new Democratic president. But I would say that in terms of, younger voters, usually, especially on a college campus, probably, skew more towards the left. So we'll have to see, and I think that there's probably a lot more people being polled than just, what a young voter would have their opinion be.
What is your prediction about the U.S. Senate in general?
I think that Republicans will gain some more footing, kind of going along with that historical narrative. And I think this is just a stepping stone into the next presidential election. It's kind of like the 1930 midterm into the 1932 presidential election. It's just one stone before a complete turnover. So I believe that we'll see a little bit of Republican rise before the presidential election.
Thank you for your answers tonight. I'm Juntong Liu, and now let's go back to Sean and Gabriella.
Thanks, Juntong. And here's what's coming in at this hour. The Kentucky race has been called with Republican Rand Paul, who has won that race. And also in Georgia, Mark Rubio is ahead with 51.7% compared to Val Demings, who has 47.3%.
And that was actually Florida. There was a little bit of a mistake. Georgia is actually Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock, and it shows an outstanding lead for Raphael Warnock right now with 66.1%, with only 9% of the votes reported. So there's still a lot of time, but that's what we're looking ahead to. And we will continue to check in with updates throughout the rest of the show tonight. Let's go back to the election night watch party, which is just down the hall from our studios in Stewart Center. If you haven't had a chance to see this new student organization center space, you should find the time to check it out.
It's brand new, just opening this fall semester. A great place for the watch party. Jaden Rusi is back with an update from there. Jaden?
Thank you, Sean and Gabriella. Thank you, Sean and Gabrielle. I'm still here on the ground floor of the Stewart Center at the watch party, and it's still a pretty active scene back here. There's still quite a few activities going on. There's still plenty of food. And there's actually still a lot of students still tuned into the watch party right now. I'm actually joined by a student right now. So can you introduce yourself for me and your major and all that?
Yeah, my name is James Shelton. I'm a communication major from Munster, Indiana. I just came to the watch party tonight to watch the election with my fellow students. Last election I watched by myself because my roommate was not interested in politics. So I figured it'd be good to have some, camaraderie here.
So why do you feel like it's important for you college students to come out to watch parties and be involved in elections?
Yeah, so I think that our generation is one of the most influential for every election. Our age group doesn't vote a lot, and so it's important for us to, make our voices heard and let the public know what we think of all the political issues that our parents and our grandparents seem to always be talking about.
And are there any elections you're keeping tight eye on, or you're just paying attention to all the results?
Yeah, I'm just paying attention to them in general. Of course, all the Indiana races, are really important to me. My home representative is running for re-election, so I'm curious to see if he gets elected. I'm also watching the Pennsylvania Senate race very closely just because of how much that's been covered in the national media coverage. It's definitely been pretty interesting so far to see the candidates go at one another.
And is there anything else you'd want to add? Do you think that there was a big enough turnout tonight yourself, personal opinion?
Yeah, I think Purdue has always been really good about voter turnout. And if you look at all the people that are here tonight, you can see there's a lot of people just here to enjoy talking to each other and enjoy talking about politics.
All right. Well, thank you, James. Thank you for your time. And I'm going to pass it back to you, Sean and Gabrielle, see if we got any more results coming in.
Thank you, Jaden. And another shout out to the Center for C-SPAN, Pi Sigma Alpha, and the other departments of history and political science for helping us pull off this event tonight.
Yeah, we're coming up at around 7:30 and anxiously awaiting for more results. As we mentioned before, Georgia and Ohio are among the states whose polls close at 7:30, and very close Senate races are in those states.
And a quick recap now of the results that we have in so far. As I just mentioned, Mark Rubio is ahead with 51.7%. Compared to Val Demings, who has 47.3%. The elections that have been called so far, we have South Carolina with Republican Tim Scott. We also have Vermont for Democrat Peter Welch, and Kentucky for Republican Randall Paul.
And like we mentioned earlier, Georgia is in a pretty decently close race with Raphael Warnock at 62.8% of the percent of the vote with 10% reporting. But we'll bring this back to you as soon as we get it. But for now, a short break and more results, and we'll hear from more students, plus a live interview with Professor of Political Science and Executive Director of the C-SPAN Archives, Dr. Robert Browning.
Don't go away. More live election night coverage from Purdue University campus still to come.
Being involved in the 3-year program at Purdue made it easier to say to myself I could get done in 3 years. The 3-year program helped save me a ton of money. In not completing my 4th year, I would save around $30,000. It will give you an advantage if anything. Doing the 3-year program at Purdue has shown me that I have motivation to do whatever it takes to get my degree.
Hi there, my name is Vikram Jaithlak, and I'm the founder and president of the Purdue chapter of the University Blood Initiative. Over the past 2 years, we've been able to collect over 300 pints of blood to be donated to local hospitals, and you can be the next one to help out.
I donate my blood at the University Blood Initiative.
Hi, I just donated blood through the University Blood Initiative.
Hi, I just donated blood through the University Blood Initiative at Purdue.
Right, I donated my blood through the University Blood Initiative at Purdue.
And I donated my blood at University Blood Initiative at Purdue.
Are you looking for a new hobby?
Or do you want to have a fun evening with your friends?
Then come climb to new heights at the Co-Rec Climbing Wall.
Football. It's the best time of the year. You know what else is great?
the world's largest and fastest mascot. You can't have Purdue football without the trains. Look for the Reamer Club outside Stewart Center, 12 to 5 p.m. on Fridays before home football games, for your chance to ride the Boilermaker Special for free. See you then!
You're watching Fast Track News.
Look inside our election night watch party. We're looking at the new Student Org Center space on the ground and basement levels of Stewart Center. Big thanks to Purdue Conferences for helping us with the logistics tonight. We'll be back out live here in a few minutes with reporter Andrea Yu.
But first, let's get a quick check of results. As we mentioned before, a few of the results have been called. We have South Carolina, we have Republican Tim Scott. In Vermont, we have Democrat Peter Welch. And in Kentucky, we have Republican Randall Paul. And Sean, what are the updates on some of the states that haven't been called yet?
Yeah, so Indiana is reporting 9% of the vote right now, and the 9% is an overwhelming lead for Todd Young at 60%, and Thomas McDermott's hanging around 37% too. So again, that's only 9% of the votes that we've seen. And again, we've been talking about Georgia all night, but it's important to keep talking about it. Raphael Warnock is still flirting around 60%. Herschel Walker's looking at 38%, but only 11% of the votes have been called. We haven't discussed too many House races, but here's a look at some of them. We'll skip the House races for now, and we're talking about Congress right now. Like I said, Herschel Walker, Raphael Warnock. This is a really close race, and we just got an update. We're at 12% reporting now. But I think it's now time for a student panel.
Yeah, we've got another group of students that we do want to talk to. Panel moderator Avik Patel is with them right now. Avik, over to you.
Thank you, Sean and Gabriella. We are once again joined by Purdue students to find out what they think about these midterms and their predictions for the outcome. We'll get to the latter question in a little bit, but first, why don't you guys introduce yourselves? Tell us your name, your major, and what year you are.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Matt Perrett. I am a junior here at Purdue University. I am majoring in history and political science in the College of Liberal Arts.
My name's Hannah Leese. I'm a third year here, and I'm majoring in political science, and I have a minor in law and society.
My name's Allison. I am a senior, and I'm studying history and law and society.
Thank you all so much for being here tonight. Be honest, when did you start caring about the midterm elections?
I started caring when I had to work for a political campaign this summer. I worked for Todd Young's campaign. I was a field worker, and I really learned a lot about the Senate race and just midterm elections through that way. So
it wasn't until this year where I actually was able to vote. So it took me a while before I was able to even reach that threshold of being able to vote. So it wasn't until this year that I was able to actually pay attention and care about what was going on in the midterms.
I don't think I started caring really until college when I started getting involved in politics. So it took me a minute to get around to it, but now I'm invested.
Well, it sounds like you guys invested in the midterms at different points, but it's encouraging to see that you all are now invested in these 2022 midterms, as they are some of the most important midterms in our history. What issues do you care about the most in these elections tonight?
Kind of focusing on the economy for me. Back where I live, gas prices are pretty high, and it's a big rural or farming community. and a lot of farmers are really they're pretty mad about how much they have to pay for gas. So that and the rising inflation is big for me.
Yeah, inflation's a big thing too. Also coming from out of state and coming from California, a lot of everything in the economy and the housing prices are just going through the roof. Where that's part of the reason why I'm here is because I can afford to live here.
Right. I think my top two issues are pretty similar. Abortion is a common one for a lot of people in the U.S. That's one of my top issues, and inflation is also one of my big things. So keeping an eye on those two.
All very important issues in these midterms tonight going forward. In your voting lifetime, so obviously not that long, the nation has been very divided, and the partisan divide is not just red state, blue state, but in many cases, it's across the dinner table. How many of you have families divided politically? All of you guys?
Yeah.
Describe your families a little bit more politically speaking.
So most of my intermediate family is mostly Republican, but I have a strong family presence in Jackson, Michigan, and through the Detroit area, and they're all pretty blue. And whenever we have big family get-togethers, it can become very difficult when someone brings politics up, and normally we try to avoid it ever since mostly the 2016 election. So.
Yeah, it's been a pretty common trend in my household too. Again, my immediate family is also very Republican, but a lot more of like my siblings or my cousins my age and the youth in general, I feel like they're leaning more towards blue and liberal ideals. And then everything is, again, family dinners and Thanksgiving can sometimes be a little interesting.
Yeah, my close family is pretty moderate. But beyond that, my extended family, it's a real mixed bag. I've got both extremes on the whole family, so it can be a bit of a toss-up.
How comfortable do you guys feel having political conversations with family or with friends?
Around my friends, we're all pretty like-minded, so I feel pretty comfortable talking to them. Kind of what we just talked about, family is very touch and go. Some of my close family members, they supported me when I had this internship in the past summer, and some of them really disapproved of it. So it's a really, really touchy subject for some.
I avoid it altogether.
I'm fine. I think I enjoy a good debate, so I'm not too mad about it if I disagree with someone, but I'm not gonna, bring it up unless somebody else brings it up. So
yeah, you guys mentioned that politics can get touchy at times, so some students are more comfortable talking about it, others not so much, and it varies. History's shown that candidates do care and want the support of the youth vote, though. If you could talk to the candidates or the campaigns, what is one thing you personally think they should know or realize about young voters like yourselves?
I feel like a lot of campaigns are really trying to reach out to the younger generation nowadays, especially since the 2016 election and into the 2020 election. But more specifically midterms, like you previously said, this is, I think, the most important midterm in recent history. And the amount of outreach to the youth, especially around Purdue University and other universities around the nation, I feel like they're really trying to reach the youth vote for that.
Yeah, I think it can be really difficult to get the youth involved, especially in college, because if you're not directly involved in it, you have a lot of other priorities going on. And so I think being able to relate to them and not just giving them the sort of red, white, and blue, campaign talk, but actually being able to speak about issues that they care about, like strongly, and being able to draw their attention away from everyday life, I think that would be a really big thing for them.
I think my biggest thing would be just to not underestimate youth voters and the ability they have to influence an election. And I think a lot of Congress people don't think about the youth vote as often as maybe they should. I know that youth vote is a lower turnout than the older generations, but it's definitely possible. You can see in history that examples of youth voters mobilizing to make change, and I think that's something that politicians now should tap into more.
Some politicians might recognize the youth vote, others not as much, but one body or entity, if you will, that does recognize the youth vote are college campuses, particularly ours, Purdue University. How many of you are taking a course this semester where you discuss the midterms? All of you?
We are all in the same course.
Yeah.
What has that course been like for you guys?
I've really learned a lot about how much the midterm influences the American presidency. It really affects how much the executive department can get done, especially after the midterm elections. Their second part of their presidency can be really influenced by them.
Yeah, like I said, it took me a while to be able to vote. So it took some time before I was able to realize the importance of the midterm elections. And once I did realize the importance through this class, I sort of understood how much is actually at stake.
Yeah, I think getting the historical framing of how much elections have changed, not just midterms, but presidential elections as well, has been really fascinating and kind of also helpful to put into context where we are right now. So.
Yeah, and we just want to give a special shout out to Dr. Catherine Brownell. She teaches our Paul 314 course on the American presidency. All four of us are students in her course, so we want to give a special shout out to Dr. Brownell for a wonderful course. And thank you to you all for the great discussion tonight. I'm Avik Patel, and now we go back to Sean and Gabriella at the news desk for an update on election results. Sean and Gabriella.
Thank you, Avik. We've been watching major media outlets and State Secretary of State result postings.
But first, we're going to take it over to an interview that we have right now with Andrea Yu. Andrea?
That's right. Thank you, Sean and Gabriella. There are many great minds here at Purdue, experts on both political science and history. I'm joined here tonight with one of them, Dr. Robert Browning. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight.
I'm glad to be here.
So I know that you teach a class on congressional campaigns. Can you tell us a little bit about what history has to tell us about midterm elections?
Well, it's a referendum on the president, usually the first midterm election that the president is up. First term for the president, and the full House is up for election. And traditionally, the party of the president loses seats, as many as 60, 70 seats sometimes. So everyone's going to be speculating tonight how many seats President Biden's party will lose.
So what do you think history did not account for this time around? What do you think will be different this year?
Well, the economy, inflation is on people's minds. The only wrinkle is that the House already has a lot of Republicans. So some people think they can't have as big a gain as you might have, like the 60 votes. But we still don't know. The economy and inflation are on people's minds. The president has a low popularity. And so that all points to big gains from the Republicans in the House.
All right. So do you have any personal predictions on how election night will go?
Well, I predict that the House will be Republican. It could go as high as 30 to 35 seats. Might even be more than that. We just don't know. We'll know in the next half hour to an hour. We'll sort of see some trends that we can sort of point to and sort of say, oh, this will be a bigger night than everybody predicted. Most of the analysts are somewhere around 25 to 30 seats.
All right. So I know that politics can be divisive. What have the discussions in your class been looking like this semester?
Well, we keep our personal views out. It's mostly analytical, but the students have all looked at the 33. Each one of them had one of the 33 toss-up races, and they did as well as the big analysts did, because in the end, it's a toss-up for some of these races that are so tight.
All right. So thank you so much for joining us here tonight with your time and your expertise. I'm going to send it back to you, Sean and Gabrielle, in the studio. This is Andrea Yu reporting live from Stewart Center.
Thank you.
Do you want me to take this? Let's run down.
And we're back. We're going to talk about the Secretary of State race here in Indiana, actually. The Diego Morales, 57.3% of the votes over Destiny Wells, and only 11% of those votes have been casted. And while we're talking about races, let's talk about all of them. We've been talking about Herschel Walker, Raphael Warnock, and where that's going. Raphael Warnock, when we last called, was about 60% of the votes. He's looking at 58% right now. And let's keep bouncing around. Let's look at any other results.
And I do want to ask you, because you said Raphael Warnock is up right now. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I've been following this race fairly closely. It's looking like Herschel Walker's controversial media stances could be coming back to bite him. It's still really early, so we can't call anything. Like I said, not all of the votes have been casted, but it looks like about 14% of the votes have been casted. But Raphael Warnock's winning with a very convincing lead, and some people are surprised. I would say most people aren't.
And again, that we probably won't have all the results in tonight. As we heard our faculty panel mention earlier, this could take days, weeks, months. We really don't know right now. But if we're going on to South Carolina, where to Florida, excuse me, where Marco Rubio is up 54.4% compared to Val Demings, who's at 44.6%. And then if we go over to North Carolina, which there does look like there are some results in right now, with Sherry Beasley up 58.2%. She is with the Democratic Party against Ted Budd, who's at 40.1%.
And before we talk about 2024, I do want to bring up Indiana. We're home of Purdue University, the Brian Lamb School of Communications here in Indiana. So let's talk about Indiana. 12% of the votes have been reported, and Todd Young is with an outstanding lead of 61.8% over Thomas McDermott. And that's, again, only 12%, so there's still a lot more votes to be called. And, of course, all of West Coast on their time zones are still being called as well because their polls close a little bit later. But we are following all the races that we have right now and the updates that we have. But let's look towards 2024.
Now, that is the next presidential election, of course, and there are a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, President Biden says he intends to run, but there has been a short of an official announcement. He's currently the oldest president in U.S. history in office.
There is also the speculation that former President Donald Trump will announce that he will run again, but also there is the speculation about Florida Governor Ron DeSantis running.
If Republicans take control of Congress, it will be very tough for President Joe Biden to make any progress on his plans for the country.
In one of our past interviews on Watching Washington, C-SPAN founder and namesake of the Lamb School of Communication, Brian Lamb, referred to that scenario as a lame duck presidency.
Even if Republicans take one chamber, it will still prove more difficult for the Democrats. But in that scenario, it would be also difficult for the Republicans.
And of course, Democrats are keeping their fingers crossed to keep control of both houses, which the House sits at 50-50 right now. But with a flip of majority does come a flip of leadership. Kevin McCarthy is a speculation for House Speaker for Republicans, taking that role from Nancy Pelosi. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell would return to the majority position, pushing Chuck Schumer to Minority Leader.
And don't take our word for it. Here are some clips from Watching Washington, our weekly public affairs show here on the Purdue Channel, where we feature long-form interviews with students, faculty, and outside experts.
A lot of our politicians are, in their 70s, 80s. Their values may and are a lot different than, people who are just turning 18, who are just going to college for the first time. The problems that they are focusing on and their kind of values, very different. So, people and students who are just now, learning to vote and getting involved in the civic, process, their votes is going to look a lot different. And that's really important because they are going to be impacted the most by a lot of the policies that are brought in by the current politicians. So a lot of students don't really understand their importance in voting or the one vote doesn't matter kind of mentality, but it really does. We see elections all the time that are incredibly close.
In the 50s, people worried that the parties didn't stand for anything. They were Tweedledee and Tweedledum. But today, parties are very different. And if you elect a Democrat, you're going to get very different policies than if you elect a Republican. So if you care about the issues, if you care about issues like abortion or inflation or taxes or student loans, it makes a difference whether you elect a Democrat or Republican. The same way with the Senate, it's very narrow, it's 50-50, and it takes more votes than 50 to get things done in the Senate. And so voting in those elections can really make a difference.
What's wrong with the government? It's kind of a forward question, but
I think as a voter, I'd like to see maybe some congressional reform in the future. Maybe, implementing age restrictions or term limits, just those kinds of things. And also maybe, an increase in integrity over time, just personally.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think reform like in the courts and everything else, and not being so party-based and biased might be good. I think that has a lot to do with how people feel. I think a lot of people feel like we're going backwards. And I don't think it's impossible to revert that and go forward and see growth, but I think that has a lot to do with how people feel about the current state of the government and being pessimistic.
What role do you see unbiased, unpartisan news playing in the midterm elections this year?
Well, that's a great question. I think in general, I talk about news as a service because it should be. And it's one of those few industries that I think really thinks about itself as a service industry. If you were running a restaurant or you have a clothing store or you have a plumbing business, you think about customer service because that's how you're going to survive. But for some reason, the news industry doesn't feel like, and I can certainly speak to that, it doesn't feel like, nor did I feel like it believed that service was the priority. It was that entertainment and emotion was becoming more of the priority for its viewers. But what I was hearing from viewers and what I continue to hear is people just want the news. They just want to understand what's going on. So where I think news can really play a great role in the public's life is by being a destination where you can get really solid, reliable information.
What type of conflicts are you thinking? Well, we can already see conflict between Biden and conservatives in the House and Senate. There's been a lot of media backlash calling Biden's presidency illegitimate these past 2 years, and a lot of social issues from the January 6th storming of the Capitol. And moving forward, there will be continual social media and political rivalries and backlash continue.
The time is now 7:51, and we're going to take it to our final student panel of the night, where we're back with Avik Patel.
Avik, what do you got?
Thanks, guys. I'm here with two more students from the American Presidency course taught by Dr. Catherine Brownell. If you want to state your name and major and where you're from.
My name is Lauren Kirchhoff. I am a political science major, and I am from Indianapolis, Indiana.
My name is Jada Horace. I am a double major in political science and law and society, and I am from Lafayette, Indiana.
Thank you both for being here. First question is, how are we feeling about tonight?
Good. I think it's a super exciting night, and there's a lot of things riding on tonight's election, and I think it's going to be really interesting tomorrow to see the results.
I agree with that. I think that there was a big voter turnout as well, especially for younger voters, especially on campus. So it'll be interesting to see if it turns out.
What do you think is going to happen tonight? Who's going to have control of Congress by the time all the votes are counted?
I think, especially this year, it's going to be really hard to tell. I think a lot of predictions compared to previous elections and midterms. It's going to be really hard. I can't really say whether it's going to swing one way or not. Historically, it typically is the opposite of what the president is. So if it followed what historical trends have shown, it would go Republican, but I'm not quite sure if this year that's what it's going to do.
I would definitely agree with that, especially in Indiana. Normally we do see more Republican votes, so I think having maybe more younger votes and especially university votes, it might be a different change, so we will see. It's definitely hard to tell.
Why do these midterms matter to you guys personally?
Well, I think every midterm really matters because I think obviously who controls Congress is who controls what laws and things go through. Personally, for me, one thing I'm really looking towards for these midterms is what politicians are going to do, especially with the economy this year. I think inflation has definitely been a problem that's affected everyone. And with a recession coming soon, I think it's really important to see how these people are willing to tackle that issue.
I would definitely agree. I think that it's super important because like locally and community wise, we're focused more on, what are those people going to do for our community rather than like, nationally. It has more of an impact for us in our daily lives. So definitely that.
How have your friends and family and people in your communities felt about these midterms?
I think it's a 50-50 split. I think a lot of people are either very, very passionate about it, or it's something that they don't even know exists. And I think a lot of people don't know what's at stake in midterm elections. So, yeah.
I would agree. I think that specifically for this midterm election, a lot more people, at least around my circle and my family and friends, are voting. A couple of years ago, I didn't see as much with the midterms. It was more like presidential elections and such. So to see, more people going out and voting and, putting their voices out there, I think that's like super great and important.
Yeah, we stated earlier in the show that general election turnout has typically been higher than midterm turnout, but we've seen a 14% increase in turnout for the midterm elections, and we could even go higher than 50% tonight. Only time will tell. My next question to you guys is, if there's one thing that you can fix about our current government, what would it be and why?
Maybe I was kind of talking to Lauren earlier about like political corruption. I think that that's kind of an interesting thing to think about, and maybe kind of like rooting that out, because I think sometimes that can be a big issue and affect, a lot of our policies and stuff.
Yeah, I think I would agree with her, and I think it's really important that our government's more transparent with us about things that they're doing inside the House, and just as much as we're being impacted by out on the outside.
Live 2022 midterm results are continuing to come in. Thank you both for being here tonight. I'm Avik Patel, and I'm going to send it back to Sean and Gabriella. Guys?
Avik, thank you so much for that panel right there. So like Avik said, we're wrapping up the show here soon. So let's talk about everything that we've talked about. So first, let's look at some of the polling that we're talking about. We haven't talked about North Carolina. They're reporting 37% of their votes, and Beasley is reporting 55% of them. So that's absolutely incredible right there. And the races that have been called, Hall in Kentucky, Democrat, or Republican, excuse me. Vermont with Welsh it went blue. And we also had South Carolina get called with Tim Scott right there. So I'm going to let Gabriella talk about Indiana, and then we'll bounce back to Georgia like we've been covering for a while.
Yeah, if we look at Indiana, Todd Young for the Republican Party leads right now at 63.7%. That just went up against Tom McDermott, who's at 32.8% now. And I do want to touch on the two polls that had these two candidates close from Indy Politics had Young in the lead about 39% to McDermott at 37%. But I did want to point out that 17% of undecided voters in the mix, just to point that out as we are watching the updates come in for this race. And now let's talk a little bit more about Georgia.
Yeah, I'm going to touch on some Georgia and some Ohio in our last 50 seconds that we have before we continue to our last segment. Raphael Warnock, with 21% of the reported votes, is at 58.1%. So this whole night, he's been flirting around 60%. It is getting a little bit closer, but Herschel Walker's only reporting 40.4% of that. And another race that has been watched very closely under many eyes has been Ohio with Tim Ryan and J.D. Vance. So 5%, so it's not a huge amount, but 5% has been reported. And that's 62.4% for Tim Ryan. J.D. Vance is around 37.6%. They've had a lot of heated debates in their times, and it's been very interesting to watch with everything that they've had going on. And like I said, Ohio is a huge one, but it's only about 5% of the, and I repeat it again, 5% of the votes. So if you're just joining us live, this is Purdue's coverage, and we're actually approaching the 8 o'clock hour. More polls will close and more results will be released.
We will be leaving you, but it has been a pleasure being a part of this live broadcast. for all of us from the Purdue channel and from our COM 497 class, which do we want to touch on again, that our COM 497 class, we did put this on, that this is for a grade, and do you just want to touch on what we've learned so far in this course?
Yeah, we've learned a lot, and a lot of our guests, including the people that we're in our 5-person class with, including Avik Patel, Ali Akra, Juntan Liu, plus our friends at Fast Track News, including reporters Andrea Yu, Jaden Rusi, Rosie Liu, Marcus Truccio, and Kevin Sarge, Li Chao Shen, our director, and everyone in the control booth, keeping things running smoothly. We couldn't make this broadcast possible without them.
And thank you to all of our live guests and panelists tonight. I'm Gabriella Chu.
And I'm Sean English. Thanks for watching and have a great night.